Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So it is September. It has been a moment since I've been making any content, and I may go into that in another video, but I thought it was time that I would dive back into YouTube videos, and I'm going to share what I read this summer. So I'm going to be doing a June, July, and August wrap up. Hi, Editing Laura here. I'm actually going to split up the months, so this is going to be June and July, and keep an eye out for August wrap up separately, coming soon. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. I will try to keep it brief, not a strong point, probably not something I'm going to be able to successfully do, but here we go. In June, I participated in the Tarot Readathon, which was a lot of fun. I loved pulling tarot cards. I loved how those kind of helped me come up with ideas for how I wanted to fit those prompts and inspiration for choices for book titles. So I did read 2 titles in June that were for nostalgia purposes. I'm not going to discuss them here on my channel, but they were 2 books from the 7-book series about the boy who lived. So we're just going to move right on from those. And the first book that I'm going to talk about is Like Lovers Do by Tracey Livesay. This is a book that I listened to the audio for, and this follows our main female character of Dr. Nicole Allen and her friend and roommate Benjamin through various situations. The 2 of them have to end up agreeing to a fake relationship, fake dating situation while on a vacation, so that Benjamin can pull some strings with his family to help Nicole because something went wrong at the hospital during her residency. Yeah, I felt like the premise was a little weak for this, but it has a lot of fun tropes. There's vacation, friends to lovers, they were roommates, just sex, kind of a friends with benefits situation, and there was some pining going on. But yeah, like I said a second ago, I felt like the setup was a little flimsy, just with this whole nepotism doctor situation happened to Nicole. And there was also a lot of setup. It felt like it took, I think we were all the way at the 30% mark before real like let's be in a fake relationship and get this party rolling stuff started happening. So I didn't care for how much setup and lead up there was to get to what I considered to be the meat of the story. And ultimately I felt like if these people were really friends, it would have like true friends, like good friends, they would have kind of the whole situation would have fallen out differently. And that was something that I felt a little annoyed about, is that I felt that we didn't get to see a ton of these people's friendship and their background together, even though they had a history years together before the start of this book, and I kind of wanted more of that. So yeah, I felt like the sex in this book was moderately hot. I would give it like a 2.2 out of 5 in the Steam scale, but I felt that there was a couple weird words being used, to each their own, but I felt like some of the sexy times were awkward. And ultimately my number one issue with this book was that they ended up in a sort of happy for now situation, and I didn't feel like there was good resolution to the book or to where they stood in their relationship, and I wanted a little bit more sort of discussion and compromise and true like let's be together whirlwind romance element. Technically this is the 2nd book in a series. I don't actually see that there are other books in this series after this, but I don't really have much interest in going back and reading book 1. The second title I'm going to discuss is Pucking Around by Emily Rath. I read this on Kindle Unlimited. This is a Why Choose Romance. We follow Dr. Rachel Price, and there is a sort of prequel novella that I read before this where Rachel meets Jake, and the 2 of them just are instantly soulmates and have this amazing one-night stand of incredible passion. And ultimately Dr. Rachel Price gets into this program, and she's going to be working with a professional hockey team, and she's thrilled. She gets there, and surprise, surprise, who was her mystery one-night stand guy, but Jake is on the team. This is a Why Choose romance because she is the physical therapist for the team, and ultimately also starts relationships with Caleb, the equipment manager, and Ilmari, who is the goalie for the team. So this has themes of polyamory, There's also a male-male relationship between two of the guys that happens. Hockey, there's a golden retriever guy, there's like the moody artist guy who's also kind of dominating. There's the strong silent guy. I feel like there's kind of a guy for everyone here. It's a little trope heavy, sometimes a little over the top, a lot of the time over the top, and a little cheesy, but I kind of ate that up also. I felt like there was a lot of steamy sex. It almost kind of bordered, for my personal tastes, on too much sex, only because I felt that there was more character development and plot development and emotional development and better communication that could have happened instead of some of those sex scenes. I would give it like a 4.75 out of 5 on the Steam scale. There was a lot of sex and all of the scenes were different ultimately. So yeah, and you also know going in that this is a kind of an insta-love situation between Rachel and each of the guys. Like, I just didn't feel like there was much emotional development in any of these relationships, and I wanted more of that relationship development and sort of logistics discussions, especially once the two guys who are in their own relationship, once that kind of develops. Like, I would have been happy to replace some of the sex with more connection and relationship building. Yeah, I would definitely be interested in continuing this series. I think that there is another book that just recently came out and a third book coming out in May of 2024. And ultimately, I gave this book a solid 4 stars. The next book I'm going to talk about is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I listened to this on audiobook. It is the second by this author that I have read. In this book, this has to do a lot with physics. We follow Professor Jason Desson, who is kidnapped and sent to what turns out to be another dimension or a different universe. So it definitely deals with, this is a sci-fi book that deals with the multiverse, physics, a lot to do with family dynamics. It's him trying to get home again. I did not feel that this book was as tightly constructed as the first title that I read, Recursion, but I still liked it. What's interesting to me is that for both of these titles, while reading it, the science portions made sense, and then as soon as I stopped reading the book or gave it any thought outside of reading the actual words, I had a moment of, well, wait a minute, that science doesn't track because of sci-fi, but yeah, I felt like there was a dramatic hook for this title, for Dark Matter. I felt like there was a good ending. Felt like there was sort of some slow bits in the middle, and I also felt like there was a character who was kind of in the middle of the book who was a main character. She was this therapist who was helping Jason, and then she just kind of disappeared and dropped out, and it felt like a big plot hole, or like what was her, purpose in the book. But yeah, ultimately I felt like there were some good lines about philosophy and the meaning of life and family, but those themes did start to get a little heavy-handed by the end. Ultimately, I enjoyed this, would read more by this author, and I gave Dark Matter 3.8 stars. The next book I'm going to discuss is Primer by Jennifer Muro. This is a digital comic I read with a comic club, book club group that I'm in. This is a young adult / middle grade demographic, and it's all about superheroes, because our main character, Ashley, ultimately finds these special paints that end up giving her a variety of powers, depending on which colors she has on her body. And the military is kind of after her because those paints used to belong to them. So this definitely has themes of superpowers, abilities, superheroes, family dynamics. Ashley is a foster kid. She's been, brought into this foster care family, and that who is sort of how she finds the paints and stuff. I definitely felt this was action-packed. This is fast-paced. I really enjoyed the art style, and I felt like it was beautiful to read. I did want a little bit more sort of expansion and development of what the situation was, Ashley's situation as well as the world situation, but I liked that this was an origin story. There's definitely plenty of room to grow, and I thought it was really an exciting read. As far as I can tell, there's no real word or indication that there is going to be another volume, but if there was, I would totally continue because I thought Primer was excellent. I did ultimately give it 3.75 stars because I had so much interest in this origin story and the main character, but young adult is kind of not for me anymore, and I think that's sort of contributed to my rating. The next book I'm going to talk about is an adult title, and this is The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. I read this digitally, and this is sort of a companion novel to one of the other ones that I'm blanking on, but I will put the cover here. But I read the other one and did like it. It was sort of science-y, and we have some of those same characters making a reappearance in this title. In The True Love Experiment, we follow our main female character of Fizzy Chen. She is a romance author who has kind of lost her chutzpah at the moment. She's kind of on this like dry spell. She's has writer's block and she's struggling. And the main male character of this is a TV producer who is named Connor, and he ultimately recruits Fizzy to be on a sort of bachelorette type show where she is going to try to find love on this reality show. So it's like kind of a workplace romance because the two of them are working together on this show. It has reality TV. Because Fizzy is an author, there's kind of like a lot of bookish tropes and content, which was kind of fun in a meta way. I had a fun time while I was reading this. I felt happier with this title than I have with some of other Christina Lauren titles I've read. But I felt like it was kind of ultimately pretty forgettable. I, even afterwards, not very long afterwards, couldn't even remember what their third act drama or what the problem was. And so I don't know. I felt like I also remember having a hard time with the premise. Like, why would Fizzy be a good choice for this show? And, you know, like, and all of the tension throughout the book is that these two can't be together. And I was always sort of unclear as to why they couldn't be together. I mean, there was this contract or something, but it just felt like, I don't know. I don't know. But I will say I did feel like there was, some emotional development happening throughout the book. I felt like a lot of that kind of happened in like a montage setting or in the narration where it said, over the last 3 weeks, all of our dates, we fell for each other. And I'm like, yeah, but why? But how? Like, I want to see those 3 weeks. So yeah, I just felt like this kind of whole book needed a little bit more editing, a little bit of like a tighter or clearer plot and better romantic tension and development. That being said, because I had such a fun time, I did rate this 4 stars. The next title that I'm going to discuss is Ignite, which is another adult contemporary romance. This is Ignite by Melanie Harlow. This is the 6th book in the Cloverleaf Farms series, but I have not read any of the other books. This book is about Winnie, who is young. She's like 22-ish, and she falls for the single father firefighter who lives next door named Dex, and therefore there is a firefighter trope there, sort of. It's not really in the book that much, but that is his job. There's an age gap. It's sort of Grumpy Sunshine, I would say. There's very like light dominance themes happening as well. I would like to read more from this author, potentially from this series, because I haven't read any of the other previous titles in this series. But I felt like this was very solid, like mid. Like I did give it 3.5 stars. But it wasn't amazing, blew me out of the water. I felt that Dex was a character that I really didn't care that much for, which I think is hard. That makes it harder for romance when you don't care for the main male character, the love interest. I did like that he had to do a lot of emotional work and heavy lifting, but I didn't really care for his thoughts about how young Winnie was with the age gap between them. It wasn't that big of a deal in the book. I think Dex was really the only person who was hung up on that. I will say that Dex's daughters were cute and they did contribute to the story and helped in the development of the connection between the two adults there. And they did have a couple heart-to-heart conversations. So I will say the emotional development that was there, I just, you know, I don't know. Overall, I felt like the writing was okay. The first half of the book felt tonally a little bit different from the second half of the book. And ultimately, I didn't generally care that much for the sex scenes in here. There was only 1 or 2 that I can even remember, and the first one just kind of grossed me out a little bit. So yeah, I don't know exactly what I'd rate on this Steam scale, probably like a 2.5 out of 5. But ultimately I gave this book 3.5 stars and would read again from this author. The next book I'm going to talk about is Happy Place by Emily Henry. I listened to this on audiobook. I think I've read all of Emily Henry's books at this point. And I had a very weird reading experience for this title because I did ultimately, like, I don't think this is a perfect book, but I did give it 5 stars. In this book, we basically follow Harriet, who is still in her residency, doctor learning. She's not a full doctor. She's like becoming a surgeon. And she and Wynne are pretending to still be together, even though they have broken up 6 months before the start of this book, because the two of them are on this vacation with their whole friend group, and they have to pretend to be together because they're around their friends on this vacation. So it's sort of a second chance romance ultimately, and there is also an element of fake dating, and there's also this whole friend group and their vacation and sort of a found family with that friend group. But this does sort of deal with miscommunication trope when we are learning about why Wynne and Harriet broke up before the start of the book. But yeah, like I said, I didn't have the best reading experience. It wasn't a book that I couldn't put down. It's not a perfect book, but it was really like hitting hard for me personally. I really related to Harriet and her personal growth story, the themes of her anxieties, her loneliness, her own personal growth of trying to figure out what her right path was. All of those were really something that I enjoyed and kind of hit home. I also liked how emotional this whole book is. I think that, does that sometimes create a little bit of drama or feels a little over the top? Maybe, but I really liked how, to me, the romance in particular felt like overwhelming and palpable and kind of tragic in a very real and emotional way. And I found the friend group to be really fun. I liked that ride or die close friendships and the elements of each of their imperfections amongst their relationships and individually, as well as their nostalgia. All of those things I was just kind of eating up with a spoon. So I ultimately gave Happy Place 5 stars. The next two titles, we are getting into July. The next two titles I'm going to talk about, I did have a Kindle Unlimited vlog, so I'll link that up in the cards and down in the description, and I will try to breeze right through these. This is Entranced by the Basilisks by Lillian Lark, which I read through Kindle Unlimited, and this is a monster romance where we have a human, Amelia, who kind of gains these powers and is having to learn from the two guys, Jasper and Ari, what these powers mean for her. It has to do with magic and secrets and sort of a secret society, and there is a little bit of polyamory, and it's a male female whole triad situation. I really like Lillian Lark's writing. I have read at this point all of the books in the Monstrous Matches series except for one novella, and I do want to read more from this author. I enjoy Lillian Lark's writing, but I do feel like this one was kind of the weakest of everything that I've read of hers so far. It just felt rushed. I wanted more emotional development. And I just kind of struggled with some of the bits in the book that had to do with embarrassment or shame. I like ultimately where the relationship ends up, but I felt like the construction of the whole book could have been better. So ultimately I gave Entranced by the Basilisks 3.7 stars, and I felt like the Sexy Times was sort of a 3.5 out of 5 for me. The other book that I read in that same vlog was also from Kindle Unlimited, and that was In a Jam by Kate Canterbary. This is a contemporary romance where we follow Shay, who has to go back to the town where she completed high school because she's inherited this tulip farm, and the guy that she was friends with in high school, Noah, lives next door to this tulip farm, and he is raising his niece Jenny, and he has been secretly in love with Shay for ever since high school. So there's a lot of pining, and this is like a small town. He's a farmer. He falls first. Ultimately, they are kind of in a fake relationship benefits situation, and there is a marriage of convenience to help Shay with the inheritance of this property. But it's also kind of like a friends to lovers situation because they knew each other in high school. Not really a second chance because they weren't together in high school, but you get it. Once I kind of got through all that setup, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy the niece, Jenny. I felt like she was a fun element to the book and contributed to the overall plot and world building and character development and everything. I did like that Noah was pining after Shay the whole time and that he fell first, but also that meant that there was no emotional development on his side because he's already in love with her before the start of the book. And yeah, ultimately I felt like there was good communication between the two of them overall, especially from Shay with regards to here's my baggage and here are my thoughts. And I felt like Noah was really responsive to Shay in a way that I quite liked. I have read other books from this author before and would read more from her again. This one kind of felt like the start of a new series because Shay has a whole group of friends, but as far as I can tell, that does not seem to exist ultimately. So I did enjoy In a Jam. I would give it 3.5 out of 5 for Steam because I felt like there were a number of sexy times and there was good sexual tension throughout this book, and Noah ultimately is kind of a dirty boy in bed in a way that I liked, and I did give In a Jam 4.4 stars altogether. The next two books are rereads and also things that I have mentioned in previous videos, so I will link those videos down in the description, but they're from older videos. Legends and Lattes was a reread for me by Travis Baldree. I listened to the audiobook this time, and this is just a super fun, cozy, you've heard about it probably all over BookTube, but we follow a orc named Viv who is no longer doing adventuring, but she's starting up a coffee shop and she makes friends with other people in the town who help contribute to her dream. And to me, this is just very like fantasy, but like light, and there is magic, but light, and it's ultimately a slice of life, very just heartwarming, comforting, well-paced, low-angst book. And I do know that a newer book that I think is like a prequel has come out relatively recently, and I do want to read that. The other book that I also reread in July was Actor Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I also listened to this on audiobook, and in this book, we have Eve Brown as our main female character. She accidentally hits Jacob, our main male character, with her car, so she has to stay with him at his place of work, this really cute bed and breakfast, and she helps him out because he is injured from this accident. And ultimately, this is an opposites attract, sort of grumpy sunshine book. There is autism rep, there are toys, good personal growth storyline from Eve. He falls first. It's a sexy, fun time. I don't think that there's quite as much sex content as some of the other books. I wrote here only 2.7 out of 5. I don't know if that's a little low or not, but yeah, I had a fun time with this one. I feel like I enjoyed both points of view. I felt like I really was very well connected to the characters. I think that's a strength of Talia Hibbert's writing. I think that this title has good tension and resolution throughout the book. It's just very quirky. It's very fun, and I ultimately gave Actor Age Eve Brown 4.1 stars, and I actually still need to read Danny Brown. I've started it twice and gotten through halfway, and both times I just have been in slumps, which is my whole life of this year, and I've never finished it. But I do love Talia Hibbert. I think every book that I've read by her, I've really enjoyed. So the last book that I finished in July was Love Theoretically by Hazelwood. I actually had the physical book from the library for this. This is kind of a complicated plot, but basically we have Elsie as our main female character. She is fake dating Jack's brother, and this complicates her interviewing for a job because Jack is on the board and helping determine whether or not she will get this job. And Elsie is not who she has presented herself to be as his brother's girlfriend once he sees her in the interview situation. This is sort of I wouldn't call it a workplace romance, but the two of them, Jack, Elsie, are both physicists and scientists, and there's a lot of content there, so they have a lot in common. And it does involve sort of fake relationship, but not between our two characters. Ultimately, he falls first, broody, tall hero. It's definitely a quirky main female character. And these are part of Hazelwood's like STEMinist series. I did feel like this book was a fun read. I overall did like the writing. I felt like there were kind of too many quips and witty puns, especially ones that were science related, and I don't know, it started to get on me a little bit. And I also felt like the plot was kind of predictable for me in this. I do like when the guy falls first, but this is not that different, in my opinion, to the Love Hypothesis. Like, why does he even like her? Like, we don't ever get to see that on page. And I felt like there was not any emotional development on his part for that. I did like seeing a really smart main female character. I liked seeing Elsie be competent, and I also liked seeing her character growth. And there were a number of side characters that I wanted more from, but I did enjoy their presence as they were in the book. So I gave both this and Love Hypothesis 4 stars, and I do actually sort of accidentally now own all of Ali Hazelwood's currently published stuff, so I probably will continue to read from this author.